In our last episode, we opened the ancient scrolls of war, prophecies written long before today's headlines, and saw how Scripture maps out the conflicts that shaped the end of the age. But there's more warnings, more nations named, and more divine patterns that reveal what's coming next. This isn't political analysis. This is prophetic alignment. In this second part of the war prophecies, we move from shadows to strategies, from distant echoes to present-day escalations. Are we living in the lull before the storm foretold by the prophets? Chapter 11, The Seventh Harbinger, The War Prophecies, Part 2. Israel's Historic Wars, Patterns of Divine Intervention. From the moment Israel re-emerged as a sovereign nation on May 14, 1948, she has been under almost constant threat from neighbors who have sworn to erase her from the map. Human logic and military science would say her survival is improbable, if not impossible, given her size, population, and the sheer number of enemies surrounding her. Yet, time and again, Israel has not only survived these trials, but emerged stronger, reclaiming land, advancing security, and strengthening her national resolve. These victories are not merely the result of clever military strategy or advanced technology, though Israel has often displayed both in abundance. They point to a deeper, supernatural reality. In every major conflict since 1948, there is an observable pattern. Israel faces overwhelming odds, suffers an initial moment of vulnerability, and then, often suddenly and in ways that defy explanation, the tide turns. The survival and success of Israel in these moments mirror the biblical accounts of deliverance found in the days of Moses, Joshua, and the Judges, where divine intervention determined the outcome. Far from being isolated historical events, these modern battles serve as prophetic signposts. They echo the promises of God to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, reminding the world that the covenant still stands, and the keeper of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Psalm 121, verse 4. They foreshadow a time yet to come, when God will act openly and unmistakably on behalf of his people, as described in prophecies like Ezekiel 38-39. Behold, he that keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. Psalm 121, verse 4. 1948, War of Independence. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion read Israel's Declaration of Independence in Tel Aviv, restoring Jewish sovereignty after nearly 2,000 years of exile. The ink was barely dry when 6 Arab nations, Egypt, Transjordan, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, launched a coordinated invasion, vowing to drive the Jews into the sea. From a military standpoint, the odds were impossible. Israel had no standing army, only the Haganah militia, and a handful of poorly trained underground fighters, many of them Holocaust survivors still bearing the physical and emotional scars of Nazi persecution. They possessed only a few thousand rifles, some makeshift armored cars, and an assortment of smuggled weapons, many outdated and unreliable. Ammunition was so scarce that in some battles soldiers were issued just 10 to 15 bullets each. Yet in the face of annihilation, the tide turned. Against all logic, Israel not only repelled the invasion, but gained territory beyond the UN partition plan's original boundaries. Even seasoned military historians admit the outcome defies explanation. From a prophetic perspective, the war is nothing short of a modern Exodus moment, a living testimony that the same God who brought his people back into the land, Isaiah 66:8, would also be the one to defend it. Psalm 44:3 captures the essence of this miracle. For they got not the land in possession by their own sword, neither did their own arm save them. But it was your right hand, and your arm, and the light of your countenance, because you had a favor unto them. Psalm 44:3. The War of Independence set the prophetic stage for everything that would follow, demonstrating from day one that Israel's survival would not depend on her own strength, but on the covenant faithfulness of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 1967. The Six-Day War. By the summer of 1967, Israel stood on the brink of annihilation. The armies of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan massed along her borders, their leaders openly declaring their intent to wipe Israel off the map. The threat was not merely military, it was existential. Outnumbered in soldiers, tanks, and aircraft, and surrounded on 3 fronts, Israel faced a crisis that echoed the desperate moments of ancient biblical battles. In a move that stunned the world, Israel launched a preemptive strike on June 5, 1967. In the opening hours, Israeli pilots destroyed nearly the entire Egyptian Air Force while it sat vulnerable on the tarmac, granting Israel immediate and decisive air superiority. What followed was a lightning campaign so swift and coordinated that historians still struggle to explain its efficiency. In just 6 days, Israel reclaimed the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank from Jordan, the Gaza Strip from Egypt, and, most significantly, East Jerusalem, including the Old City and the Temple Mount. For the Jewish people, the return to Jerusalem was not just a strategic victory, it was a moment of prophetic weight. The words of the psalmist seem to come alive. "If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning." Psalm 137, verse 5. After nearly 2,000 years of exile, the city of David was once again under Jewish sovereignty. To many believers, this was a step toward the fulfillment of Zechariah 12:6, which foretells that Judah will be like a hearth of fire among the wood, consuming the surrounding nations. "In that day will I make the governors of Judah like an hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf. And they shall devour all the people round about, on the right hand and on the left. And Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem." Zechariah 12:6. From a purely military perspective, Israel's victory seemed impossible. Outnumbered more than 2-1 and facing the combined might of multiple Arab states, her survival should have been in question. Yet, the war ended with Israel controlling territory more than 3 times its original size. The speed and decisiveness of the campaign defied conventional logic. To those who look through the lens of Scripture, the explanation is clear. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was still keeping his covenant promises. This war was not merely another chapter in Israel's modern history. It was a prophetic pivot point. By restoring Jerusalem to Jewish control, the Six-Day War moved the clock of biblical prophecy forward, setting the stage for the events described by the prophets and echoed in the pages of the New Testament. In those 6 extraordinary days, the world witnessed a modern-day echo of Joshua's conquests, a reminder that no coalition of nations can thwart the purposes of the Almighty. 1973. The Yom Kippur War. On October 6, 1973, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, dawned in Israel with an unusual stillness. It was the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, a day when businesses closed, traffic stopped, and families gathered in fasting and prayer. Yet as Israel sought the Lord in sacred assembly, her enemies sought her destruction. In a coordinated surprise attack, Egypt struck across the Suez Canal and Syria stormed down from the Golan Heights, catching the nation completely off guard. Many soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, were not even at their posts, having been released to observe the solemn day. In the opening hours, Israel's situation appeared desperate, Egyptian forces overran the Bar-Lev line along the canal, while Syrian tanks poured through the Golan, threatening to sweep into the Galilee. For a moment, it seemed as though the prophecy of Psalm 83, nations conspiring to cut them off from being a nation, was playing out before the world's eyes. But the God of Israel had not abandoned his people. Though the cost was high and casualties heavy, a fierce counteroffensive began. On the Syrian front, Israel managed to halt the advance and push enemy forces back beyond the pre-war lines. In the south, a daring maneuver led by General Ariel Sharon crossed the Suez Canal into Egyptian territory, encircling the Egyptian Third Army and forcing a ceasefire. From a military perspective, the turnaround was extraordinary. Within days, Israel shifted from near collapse to holding positions deep in enemy territory. But for those who view history through the lens of prophecy, this was more than battlefield strategy. It was another chapter in the enduring testimony that Israel's survival is not secured by her own arm, but by the covenant-keeping God who has promised her a future. The Yom Kippur War was a sobering reminder that Israel's enemies often strike during times of perceived vulnerability. Yet, time and again, divine strength has turned the tide. Just as in the days of Jehoshaphat, when the Lord said, "The battle is not yours, but God's." 2 Chronicles 20:15. Israel's deliverance in 1973 stands as a modern witness that his hand still shields his people. And he said, "Hearken you, all Judah, and you inhabitants of Jerusalem, and you King Jehoshaphat, thus says the Lord unto you, be not afraid nor dismayed by reason of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God's." 2 Chronicles 20:15. 1991, the Gulf War. In January 1991, as the world's attention was fixed on the U.S.-led coalition's efforts to liberate Kuwait from Saddam Hussein's Iraq, Israel suddenly found herself under direct attack, without firing a single shot, in the conflict. Over the course of the war, Saddam Hussein launched 41 Scud missiles into the heart of Israel's civilian population centers, targeting Tel Aviv, Haifa, and other cities. His goal was clear: provoke Israel into retaliating, fracture the coalition, and shift the war into a wider Middle East conflict. The damage was staggering. Over 5,000 homes were destroyed or severely damaged. Entire apartment buildings were reduced to rubble, and countless others were left uninhabitable. Yet, against all expectations, the death toll was astonishingly low. Only 2 fatalities were recorded from all the missile strikes. Military analysts, engineers, and rescue workers searched for a rational explanation, but even the most seasoned experts admitted the numbers didn't add up. How could missiles, some carrying large, high-explosive warheads, obliterate entire buildings and yet spare so many lives? Some point to timing and coincidence. Others quietly acknowledge what many believers see plainly: the invisible shield of divine protection. Whether through angelic intervention, the sovereign hand of God, or a combination of both, the outcome was undeniable. Israel was spared catastrophic loss of life. This event became another marker in the ongoing pattern of Israel's supernatural preservation. It was a modern echo of Psalm 91, verse 7. 1,000 shall fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. The Gulf War reminded the world that even in conflict Israel did not start. The covenant-keeping God still watches over his people, ensuring that, though targeted by her enemies, she remains standing. 2008 to 2009, Operation Cast Lead. Between December 27, 2008, and January 18, 2009, Israel undertook Operation Cast Lead, a decisive military campaign launched after years of relentless rocket fire from Gaza. For over 8 years, Hamas had fired Qassam and Grad rockets into southern Israel, terrorizing cities like Sderot, Ashkelon, and Beersheba. The months leading up to the operation were particularly intense. In just the 6 months preceding the war, over 750 rockets and mortars had been launched at civilian communities. Despite repeated ceasefire agreements, Hamas repeatedly violated them, using the lulls not to seek peace but to rearm and strengthen its military infrastructure. By late 2008, the security situation had become untenable, and Israel acted. The operation targeted weapons caches, rocket launch sites, smuggling tunnels, and Hamas leadership, carefully distinguishing between combatants and civilians, even though Hamas embedded itself in densely populated neighborhoods. While the battles raged in the heart of urban Gaza, Israel's Iron Dome defense system, in its early stages, and well-drilled civilian evacuation protocols kept mass casualties on the Israeli side remarkably low. This was not only a demonstration of military precision, but also of Israel's ethical warfare doctrine, restraining fire when civilians were in harm's way, even at the risk of losing the element of surprise or strategic advantage. For many believers, Operation Cast Lead was another chapter in Israel's prophetic story, a reminder that God's covenant promises still hold. Israel once again faced an existential threat and emerged standing, echoing Psalm 125, verse 2. As the mountains are round about Jerusalem, so the Lord is, round about his people from henceforth even forever. The war underscored both the necessity of vigilance and the reality of divine preservation, even in the modern age. 2014, Operation Protective Edge. In July 2014, a chain of escalating events ignited a 50-day conflict that would test Israel's resolve yet again. The war began after the kidnapping and brutal murder of 3 Israeli teenagers by Hamas operatives, an act that shocked the nation and drew international condemnation. But beneath the surface, another threat had been quietly growing for years: the terror tunnels. Hamas had invested immense resources into building a sprawling network of sophisticated underground passages stretching from Gaza into Israeli territory. Some tunnels reached over a mile in length, equipped with electricity, rail tracks, and reinforced walls. Many ended just beneath Israeli civilian areas, some under kindergartens, designed for mass abductions and large-scale terror raids. When Israel launched Operation Protective Edge, the mission was not only to stop the relentless rocket fire, over 4,500 rockets during the conflict, but also to uncover and destroy this subterranean threat. In total, Israel located and demolished 32 terror tunnels, many of which could have facilitated catastrophic attacks had they remained undiscovered. Despite fierce urban combat and a relentless rocket barrage, Israel employed extraordinary measures to minimize civilian casualties in Gaza, often at the cost of operational surprise. These included the controversial, yet humanitarian, roof knock warnings, where small, non-lethal munitions were dropped on a building to warn residents before a targeted strike. This ethical approach drew criticism from detractors and praise from supporters, but it underscored Israel's doctrine of restraint, even in the face of existential danger. The outcome was both military and moral. Israel emerged battered but unbroken. Its citizens reminded that vigilance is a constant necessity, and that its survival often hinges on both human courage and divine providence. For those who view modern events through a prophetic lens, Operation Protective Edge was yet another echo of Psalm 121, verse 4. Behold, he that keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. 2023 Swords of Iron War. On October 7, 2023, during Simchat Torah, a joyous festival marking the completion of the annual Torah reading cycle and a time when Jewish communities celebrate with dancing and singing. Israel was plunged into its darkest day in decades. In a meticulously planned and shockingly brutal assault, Hamas launched a multi-front attack that shattered the nation's sense of security. From the early morning hours, over 3,000 rockets rained down on southern and central Israel, unleashing chaos and fear. But the rockets were only the opening act. Heavily armed terrorists breached Israel's borders, infiltrating towns, kibbutzim, collective agricultural communities, and even a music festival in the Negev desert. What followed defied comprehension. More than 1,200 civilians were murdered. Men, women, children, and the elderly. Entire families were executed in their homes, hostages were dragged into Gaza, and atrocities were committed so barbaric they stunned even veteran war correspondents. The chilling parallel to Genesis 6:11-13 could not be ignored. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. Hebrew, Hamas. The very name of the terrorist group, Hamas, is the same biblical term used to describe the depravity and lawlessness of Noah's day, when judgment loomed on the horizon. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Genesis 6:11-13. Yet even in the face of such carnage, Israel's survival defied the odds. Within hours, the nation mobilized under Operation Iron Swords, reclaiming lost ground, striking militant infrastructure, and targeting the vast network of terror tunnels under Gaza. The swiftness and precision of Israel's counteroffensive testified to a resilience that was as much spiritual as it was strategic. The massacre became a turning point, not only militarily, but prophetically. Jewish communities worldwide rallied in solidarity, and discussions surged about whether this was the spark that could ignite the prophetic war cycle outlined in Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, and Ezekiel 38-39. For many watchers of biblical prophecy, October 7th was not an isolated act of terror, but potentially the trigger that will set into motion events leading to Daniel's 70th week. Above the grief and rage, one truth remained unshaken. He that keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. Psalm 121, verse 4. Even when surrounded by enemies and drenched in mourning, Israel stood wounded but unbroken under the shadow of the covenant-keeping God. Prophetic significance. Throughout modern history, Israel's wars reveal a striking and recurring prophetic pattern. 1. The attack comes suddenly, often in holy seasons. Enemies strike during times of rest, worship, or celebration, moments Israel least expects conflict. 2. Global condemnation follows. The international community often turns against Israel, framing her defense as aggression. 3. Victory against all odds. Outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded, Israel emerges not only intact but strengthened. 4. A supernatural signature. These victories bear marks of divine restraint, precision, and preservation that defy human explanation. When viewed through the lens of prophecy, these conflicts function as birth pangs, foreshocks leading toward the greater end times wars of Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, and Ezekiel 38-39. Each battle carries the same divine fingerprint. Impossible odds met with supernatural deliverance. Enemies plan, nations rage, missiles fly, yet Israel stands. These aren't mere stories of survival. They are living testimonies of a covenant-keeping God. the same God who split the Red Sea, Exodus 14:13-31, and later parted the Jordan River, Joshua 3-4, who rained manna in the wilderness, Exodus 16, and brought down Jericho's walls, Joshua 6:20, still moves on behalf of his people. And one day, just as surely as he acted then, he will act again. Ezekiel 38:23 promises a moment when his intervention will be so direct, so unmistakable, that the nations will have no choice but to know, I am the Lord. The seventh harbinger is sounding. The storm of war is rising. Will you be found standing? The world's wars are not chaos. They are choreography. What appears to be global disorder is, in truth, divine order unfolding on the stage of human history. Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, Ezekiel 38-39. These are not vague predictions. They are distinct prophetic milestones, each marking a step toward Messiah's return. 3 different wars, 1 unstoppable timeline. Psalm 83, a war of annihilation, where Israel's surrounding neighbors rise in hatred to erase her name forever. Isaiah 17, a sudden surgical strike, the destruction of Damascus, the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. Ezekiel 38-39, an unprecedented assault led by Gog of Magog, where God himself, not Israel's military, not the UN, intervenes with earthquakes, fire, hail, and confusion. Each conflict escalates the tension. Each sets the stage for the next. Together, they form the drumbeat of the seventh harbinger, the war prophecies. The headlines match the prophets. Ancient enemies are re-emerging under new flags. Russia, Iran, Turkey unite in an unnatural alliance. Arab nations encircle Israel again. Terror strikes, missiles fly. Beneath the soil of every battlefield lies a prophecy waiting for its fulfillment. The signs are overlapping. The solar eclipses of 2017 and 2024 carved an X over the United States. Earthquakes rumble, disasters multiply, ancient alliances form, the sword is being sharpened. Just as in Ezekiel's vision, God will make himself known, not through human diplomacy or military brilliance, but through supernatural acts of judgment and deliverance. This is not fear-mongering, it is forewarning. With every harbinger comes an invitation. Repent, return, and ready yourself. The seventh harbinger is not just about war, it is about the God of war, the Holy One of Israel, the covenant keeper, the one who declares the end from the beginning. Soon, the nations will know his name. The harbinger has sounded, the alliances are forming, the judgments are aligning, and the king is coming. The time to choose your allegiance is not later, it is now. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall pane glass windows of my study, bathing the room in a warm, amber glow. Dust motes danced lazily in the slanted light, suspended between heaven and earth like prayers waiting for an answer. The atmosphere was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. It was thick with anticipation. The kind of stillness that doesn't calm, but warns. Irene sat across from me at the small round table, our usual spot for Bible study and end-time discussions. But today, her demeanor was more agitated than reflective. Her Bible lay unopened beside a stack of freshly printed news articles. I could see the headlines from where I sat. Iran and Hezbollah threaten retaliation. Jordan's king calls emergency summit. Hamas vows continued resistance. The print still smelled like ink. Her brow was furrowed, her finger tapping an anxious rhythm on the edge of the paper. Finally, she broke the silence. "Anne, I don't get it," she said, shaking her head. "Everywhere I turn, podcasts, prophecy conferences, even the Sunday sermons, it's all about Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38 and 39, but no one seems to mention Psalm 83 or Isaiah 17. Why is that? Aren't those wars just as important?" I looked up from my open Bible, the thin pages ruffling slightly as the air shifted from the vent above. I smiled gently, but my eyes met hers with deliberate seriousness. That's a great question, Irene, and one that more people need to be asking. I closed my Bible just long enough to lean forward, pressing my hands together in thought. The reason Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17 don't get the same attention as Ezekiel's war is because it doesn't have the same apocalyptic flash. Ezekiel's prophecy is filled with supernatural interventions. Fire falling from heaven, earthquakes, nations turned upside down. It feels like something out of a Hollywood script. But Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, they're more subtle, more personal, and that's what makes it dangerous. She raised an eyebrow, leaning in. I continued. You see, Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17 aren't global. They're regional. They don't involve distant superpowers. They involve Israel's immediate neighbors, the ones with a generational grudge. And the disturbing part is, while Ezekiel's war may still be on the horizon, both Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17 might already be unfolding, right now, before our very eyes. Irene leaned forward, her interest visibly piqued. I slid my Bible toward her and flipped it open to a familiar passage. The thin pages crackled faintly as I turned them. Listen to this, I said, reading aloud. They have said, "Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against you." Psalm 83, 4-5. I paused, then tapped the next verses with my finger. The tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites, of Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tri. Assyria also is joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot. Selah. Psalm 83, 6-8. Here's the list of nations: Edom, Moab, Ammon, Amalek, the Philistines, Gebal, Tyre, and Assyria. Lifting my gaze, I watched Irene's brow crease as she followed along. I offered the translation. In modern terms, Edom, Moab, and Ammon now fall within the borders of Jordan. Amalek is often associated with the Negev, southern Israel itself. The Philistines, of course, point to Gaza. Gebal and Tyre correspond to Lebanon, and Assyria? That's the territory covering much of modern northern Iraq, northeastern Syria, and parts of southeastern Turkey, an empire that at times extended its control over Damascus and the surrounding regions. Irene's eyes widened in astonishment. That's literally the map of every single nation that surrounds Israel today, and most of them are hostile right now. I nodded again, more somber this time. Exactly. Psalm 83 isn't about some far-off coalition from distant continents. It's about Israel's immediate neighbors, nations that have, for millennia, sought her destruction and still harbor that ambition. This isn't just prophecy. It's a repeating pattern. Irene's eyes widened. And Isaiah 17? Damascus isn't a distant symbol. It's a real city, still standing today, right in the heart of Syria, and God says its destruction will be sudden and complete. I leaned back slightly, the weight of the scripture settling between us like a stone dropped in still water. This isn't random, I said. It's strategic, it's prophetic, and it's personal, for God. Irene's fingers tightened around the edges of the articles in her lap. So then, Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17 aren't just history repeating, they're prophecy in motion. I gave a slow, solemn nod. Yes, and if they unfold as many scholars anticipate, they could serve as the spark, the match that ignites the larger conflagration of Ezekiel 38. Psalm 83 sets the stage, Isaiah 17 delivers a sudden blow, and Ezekiel 38 brings the nations against Israel in a war that only God himself will end. Irene looked down at the articles she had brought, headlines about rocket fire from Gaza, rising tensions in Lebanon. border skirmishes with Jordan, and Hezbollah's growing arsenal. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. It feels like Psalm 83 is less a prophecy and more a playbook. I nodded slowly, letting the weight of her words settle. That's exactly what many Bible scholars have come to believe. Psalm 83 isn't just poetic lament, it's a tactical outline, a forecast. And if it is prophetic, then it's not just history on repeat, it's the prelude to something much bigger. I paused, then added, think about it. Psalm 83 involves Israel's immediate neighbors, those most likely to strike first. It would make sense for a short, brutal regional war to erupt, one where Israel is forced to neutralize its closest threats. Only then, once Israel is dwelling in a false sense of security, does the Ezekiel 38 alliance strike from afar. Irene sat back, eyes scanning the invisible map in her mind, tracing the jagged borders of the Middle East as if she could feel the tension pulsing along each line. So Psalm 83 clears the ground. Isaiah 17 delivers the decisive blow. Ezekiel 38 ignites the stage for a global confrontation. Exactly, I said. It's strategic, it's sequential, and if we're watching closely, we may be seeing it all unfold right now. So, Irene whispered, if Psalm 83 comes first, then we're not just watching prophecy unfold, we're standing in the middle of it. I looked at her, my voice low but unwavering. I believe we are, Irene. October 7th, 2023 wasn't just another headline. It was a prophetic tremor. The brutality of Hamas, the escalating threats from Hezbollah, the Houthis seizing the moment, it's all Iran's proxies, stirred to strike. And now Iran itself has crossed the line and launched a direct attack. I paused, letting the weight of it settle. And if that weren't enough, the final piece of the Psalm 83 puzzle, Syria, is stirring. Israel just struck Damascus in defense of the Druze population along the Golan Heights, who have been targeted by Islamist militias. It's as if every border is erupting at once, and through it all, the cry of Psalm 83 still echoes. Let us wipe them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. I leaned forward, my tone sharpening. This isn't just politics. It's a confederacy of hatred, rooted in ancient enmity and revived through modern alliances. It's the Psalm 83 spirit, alive, dangerous, and rising again. Irene's eyes welled, but I continued gently. And yet, we've seen this before. 1948, 1967, 1973, 1991, 2008, 2014, and 2023. Surrounded, outnumbered, written off. But God has never broken his covenant, and he will not start now. Irene looked up slowly, her voice trembling. But this time, it feels different. I nodded, my expression grave. You're right. In the past, Israel has fought massive wars and witnessed miraculous deliverance, but there were always gaps. Some borders stayed quiet, some enemies held back. October 7th, 2023 changed that, I continued. For the first time in modern history, Israel was surrounded on every side, north, south, east, and west, at the same time. Gaza erupted in brutality. Hezbollah rained rockets from Lebanon. Syria stirred with fire from its borders. The Houthis launched missiles from Yemen. Iran orchestrated from the shadows. Even Jordan simmered with unrest. I took a breath. It wasn't just an attack, it was an encirclement, the kind Psalm 83 describes. A tightening noose of hatred, ancient in its origin, modern in its methods. I paused and turned back to Psalm 83, running my finger down the verses. It's all here, Irene. Ancient names wearing modern faces. A confederacy fueled by hatred, united by one purpose. Let us wipe them out as a nation. And for the first time in history, the map perfectly matches the prophecy. Irene leaned back, Her eyes locked on the pages in front of her, her voice barely above a whisper. So you're saying, we're not just reading prophecy anymore. We're standing inside it? I met her gaze, my voice heavy with certainty. I believe we're in the midst of the Psalm 83 war right now. This isn't a rehearsal for the last days, it's curtain time. The timing, the players, the intensity, everything lines up. This isn't a preview. This is the performance. She glanced at the headlines again, her brow furrowing. And Damascus? The report said Israel struck near the capital just days ago. I held her gaze. Yes, and that single event inching us closer to the Isaiah 17 prophecy. Behold, Damascus will cease to be a city and will become a ruinous heap. It's the kind of prophecy that could be fulfilled in a single night. And I believe the ground is already trembling beneath it. Irene's brows furrowed. But Israel's been defending itself. Will they win these wars? They will, I answered without hesitation. Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17. Israel will prevail militarily. God has preserved them time and again. But the next war, Ezekiel's Gog and Magog war, that's different. Israel won't win that one by its own strength. I reached across the table and tapped her Bible. That war, Irene. God himself steps in. Earthquakes will shake the land. Hailstones will fall. Fire will rain down. Confusion will grip the armies until they turn on each other. And it's not just about saving Israel. It's about making himself known. Ezekiel 38:23 declares, "Thus will I magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am the Lord." Irene's voice trembled. And you're saying we're already watching that war gather on the horizon? Yes, I said. The nations named in Ezekiel 38 and 39, Russia, Iran, Turkey, they're already aligning. The hostility is in place. The alliances are tightening. It's the next prophetic layer, and when it happens, it will be undeniable. She turned toward the window as if seeing the world for the first time. And after that war? I drew a slow breath. That war won't end in treaties. It will end in awe. The world will be shaken, then seduced. A false peace will settle over the nations, a momentary sigh of relief. And in that calm, the Antichrist will make his move. He'll confirm a covenant with Israel, offering protection. But it will be a lie. And that's the spark that ignites the final 7 years, the tribulation, just as Daniel 9:27 foretold. Irene was quiet. Then finally she whispered, "It's all happening." I nodded, my voice low but firm. And the clock is ticking. Chapter Summary. Chapter 11 unveils the seventh harbinger, the war prophecies, the scriptural blueprint of coming military conflicts that culminate in divine judgment and global awakening. From Psalm 83 to Isaiah 17, from Ezekiel 38 to 39 to Israel's own war history, this chapter exposes the ancient forecasts driving today's headlines. These wars are not random. They are revelations unfolding in real time. This chapter distinguishes 3 major prophetic wars: the Psalm 83 war, a regional assault by Israel's immediate neighbors bent on her annihilation; the Isaiah 17 prophecy, forecasting the sudden obliteration of Damascus; and the Gog and Magog war of Ezekiel 38 to 39, describing a vast multinational invasion met by direct supernatural intervention. Together, these conflicts form a sequential pattern, escalating from localized hostility to global warfare and culminating in divine glory. The chapter also recounts Israel's modern miracles of survival, 7 victories that defy human explanation. From the 1948 War of Independence to the lightning triumph of the 1967 Six-Day War. From the surprise attack during the 1973 Yom Kippur War to the miraculous protection from Saddam Hussein's missile barrage in the 1991 Gulf War. From the targeted campaigns of 2008 to 2009's Operation Cast Lead to 2014's Operation Protective Edge, and now the Swords of Iron War sparked by Hamas's brutal October 7, 2023 assault. Again and again, against overwhelming odds, Israel not only endures, but prevails. It is not by might, nor by power, but by the unmistakable hand of the covenant-keeping God who still watches over his people. Yet the signs are not confined to the battlefield. They are also written in the heavens. The solar eclipses of 2017, 2024, and 2026 appear to form a synchronized prophetic message. A giant X traced across America in 2017 and 2024, intersecting over a region known as Little Egypt, and a shadow in 2026 passing over volatile, biblically significant lands in the Middle East, including Damascus. These celestial alignments echo Genesis 1:14's declaration that the sun, moon, and stars were appointed for signs and seasons, and may serve as divine timestamps pointing to America's urgent call to repentance and the Middle East's looming prophetic wars. The wise watch, the faithful will prepare, and the world, whether ready or not, will soon see that the same hand that governs the heavens also governs the destiny of nations. Ultimately, the seventh harbinger reveals that the God of Israel remains the defender of Israel. The wars foretold are not just judgments on her enemies, but signs to the world that the king is coming. The alliances have formed, the warnings are manifesting, and America, too, stands under the shadow of judgment for its own rebellion. Key takeaways. The Psalm 83 war is likely a distinct regional conflict involving Israel's immediate Arab neighbors and may precede the larger Gog-Magog conflict. Isaiah 17 prophesies the sudden, total destruction of Damascus, an event that may ignite broader conflict in the Middle East. The Gog and Magog War of Ezekiel 38-39 describes a vast coalition, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and others, invading Israel, only to be defeated by divine intervention. Israel's miraculous modern victories, 1948, 1967, 1973, 1991, 2008-2009, 2014, 2023, form a prophetic pattern of supernatural preservation, affirming her covenant role in God's plan. The solar eclipses of 2017, 2024, and 2026 may serve as prophetic markers. 2017 and 2024 form an X across America, possibly warning of judgment, while 2026 crosses the Middle East, including Damascus, hinting at Isaiah 17's prophecy. The seventh harbinger is not simply about war, it's about the revelation of God's power, his unbreakable covenant with Israel, and the soon return of Christ. Chapter 11 sounds the seventh harbinger. The wars of prophecy are aligning. The alliances are in motion. The divine response is imminent. And the choice of allegiance between the kingdoms of this world and the coming king must be made now. The war prophecies have spoken, not as distant possibilities, but as present-day warnings echoing through unfolding events. We are no longer at the edge of history. We are crossing its threshold. The final harbinger has yet to be revealed, but the countdown has already begun. In our next episode, we begin the final chapter, the last days before forever, not the end of a message, but the beginning of eternity. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so others can join this journey too. Thank you for letting me share this with you. If you'd like a copy of my books for yourself or loved ones, they are available on Amazon. Until next time, take care and be blessed.